So this is the 0200 hours GMT edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel, broadcasting under the banner of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions on the internet. This is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel, broadcasting under the Baby Angel Geronimo editions on the internet at 0200 hours GMT or 300 hours British Standard Time on Saturday the 28th of October 2023. The main overall theme of this edition is that the British press, also known as the Fleet Street or the Fleet Street as Fleet Street, totally stupid. Sky News press preview of Saturday's front pages, typically abysmally dishonest, and diversionary British press, British television news, British media commentators, all festering in degenerate, corrupt, untruthful, deferring to the genocidist state of Israel. Well, the Biden-fronted image of the USA presidency is put into service and serving the Zionist state's demand that the so-called Muslim state of Qatar be ordered by the USA to stop the already very timid journalism by Al Jazeera. There is nothing in the coverage which can only be called cover up by the so-called left of center sort of titles in Fleet Street. There is absolutely nothing that actually is telling the truth to the readers. Not that the readers expect much. For decades, the readers of the British press and media, consumers, have got brainwashed. Well, they didn't need to be brainwashed, but they have been brainwashed. They didn't need to be brainwashed because they were already totally hostile to any international legal environment to be created in Palestine. And for the genocidist agenda being pursued by the Zionist state of Israel against the Palestinians be brought to an end. So for decades, so let's say for 8 years, the state of Israel that has been the product of the British Prime Minister Balfour thinking up the Zionist state, its location, has remained defiant against the parallel international organization called the United Nations Organization. So total has been the contempt with which the Zionist state of Israel has been allowed to treat the United Nations. That there is no pretense, there is no hiding the contempt that the state of Israel has shown for the United Nations. And none of the British media, well, this excludes the tabloids. The media, like the ones that have kind of tokenistic comments and commenters. For example, the Murdoch controlled Times, the Guardian, the Daily Boris Johnson graph. They don't recognize the significance whatsoever of the United Nations. So, in the last 80 years, if you look at the actual contents, do a contents analysis of the British so called media, that is Fleet Street, there is no mention. The United Nations doesn't appear. The only time when the United Nations appears as a news item in the British media, British press, is when somebody like the current Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, Anthony Guterres, is condemned by the State of Israel for daring to talk about the United Nations' main purpose for existence. In a long time, the United Nations' main bureaucrat, career bureaucrat, the Secretary General, has made any public comment condemning the murderous, genocidist attacks on the Palestinians. And immediately the Zionist state of Israel rushed to threaten the United Nations Organization itself with teaching a lesson. And there has been no recognition of this as an aggravating outrage committed by the Zionist state of Israel. In the contents of the Guardian, the Times, the Telegraph, etc., there has been no mention whatsoever. There has been no mention whatsoever of the assault, the genocidist assault that has been taking place against the Palestinians by the so-called opposition in the UK House of Commons. In fact, the so-called opposition, fronted by the political murderer of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, has been mired in a confrontation by his frontbench regime with a significantly Muslim constituency of Labour Party councillors and a smaller number of Labour Party members of Parliament, including this time the incumbent London mayor, Sadiq Khan, all of them demanding that Starmer immediately takes actual, genuine action, demanding that the state of Israel stops its attacks on the people of Palestine, what they call the ceasefire demand. So these are the issues that have been ignored in the latest edition of the so called press preview on Sky News, which has continued to ignore the international context, the international setting, the international obligation, and indeed the Labour Party. The Labour Party, after the UK government, is the second most influential part of the UK state, the opposition. So Sky News is actually relegating the opposition, Labour Party, into a state of nothing. So 12 minutes ago, this was the post on the Guardian online. Gaza phone and internet cut off as Israel intensifies attacks. The United Nations General Assembly calls for immediate, durable humanitarian truce. Resolution passed by 120 votes to 14 is not binding, but carries great political and symbolic weight. So, byline to Patrick Winter, diplomatic editor. So 23:29 British Standard Time on Friday, the 27th of October 2023. The UN General Assembly has overwhelmingly called for an immediate, durable, and sustainable humanitarian truce between Israel and Hamas and demanded unhindered aid access to the besieged Gaza Strip. The motion drafted by Jordan is not binding but carries political weight, reflecting the degree to which the US and Israel are isolated internationally as Israel steps up its ground operations. It passed late on Friday with 120 votes in favor while 45 abstained and 14, including Israel and the US, voted against. The resolution did not name Hamas, which is holding about 220 civilian hostages who were seized during the devastating 7th of October attacks. But it calls for the immediate and unconditional release of all civilians illegally held captive and demands their safety and humane treatment, and condemns attacks on both Palestinian and Israeli civilians. The resolution also demands essential supplies to be allowed into the Gaza Strip, and humanitarian workers have sustained access. And it calls on Israel to rescind its order for people in Gaza to evacuate the north and move south, and firmly rejects any attempts at the forced transfer of the Palestinian civilian population. The resolution also stresses the need to urgently establish a mechanism to ensure the protection of the Palestinian civilian population. It sends the message to everyone enough. Enough is enough. This war has to stop. The carnage against our people has to stop. And humanitarian assistance should begin to enter the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian envoy to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, told reporters. After pressure from the United States and Canada, an attempt to condemn Hamas by name and demand an immediate release of hostages was passed by 88 votes to 55 but failed to win the required two-thirds majority. Jordan had originally demanded an immediate ceasefire, but in a bid to maximize support, amended the draft by calling for an immediate, durable, and sustainable humanitarian truce, leading to a cessation of hostilities. It is the first time the United Nations has come to a collective view on the Middle East crisis after four attempts to reach a common position on the smaller 15 strong UN Security Council fell due to votes, failed due to vetoes being wielded either by Russia or the US. Israel's ambassador Gilad Erdan, who had argued that any ceasefire would give Hamas time to rearm so they can massacre us again, responded angrily to the vote. Today is a day that will go down as infamy. We have all witnessed that the United Nations no longer holds even one ounce of legitimacy or relevance, he said, telling the assembly, shame on you. In a statement, Hamas welcomed the call for a break in the conflict. We demand its immediate application to allow the entry of fuel and humanitarian aid for civilians, the group said. Earlier in the day, the US envoy, Linda Thomas Greenfield, described the resolution as outrageous and said cover, it gave cover to Hamas. She said the Hamas goals were single minded and they're sickening. They're determined to destroy Israel. They never cared about the genuine needs or concerns or safety of the people it claims to represent. And Hamas has no respect for the rule of law or for human life. To them, Palestinian civilians are expendable, she said. But Thomas Greenfield also said that the world could not go back to an untenable situation in the region. We must not go back to the status quo where Hamas terrorizes Israel and uses Palestinian civilians as human shields. And we must not go back to the status quo where extremist settlers can attack, terrorize Palestinians in the West Bank. The status quo is untenable and it is unacceptable. This means that when this crisis is over, there has to be a vision of what comes next, Thomas Greenfield said. As opposed to the divided 15 strong Security Council, Jordan and other Arab states were trying to engineer a clear public condemnation of Israel, painting its response to the Hamas attack as being in breach of international humanitarian law. In the past fortnight, the United Nations Security Council has 4 times failed to adopt a collective view without either Russia or the US wielding its veto, leaving the UN in effect muted. This is 02:22 GMT on Saturday, the 28th of October 2023. This is the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast under the Baby Angel Geronimo editions. We shall be talking more about all of these issues in later editions. This is being ended at 02:24 GMT on Saturday, the 28th of October 2023.